Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sunday mornings at the Marxist Library. My name is Alan Miller, and I will be hosting this meeting. I'm a member of the program committee that organizes the Sunday mornings at the Marxist Library. And I would like to start off by saying that we always welcome input, feedback, suggestions for topics, and suggestions for speakers. You can contact us through our website at ICSSmarx.org. A quick note, this session is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. In fact, not only is it a good morning, but it's good afternoon and good evening, because we now typically have attendees from throughout the United States and even sometimes throughout the world. This weekly program of the Institute for the Critical Study of Society in pre-pandemic times was hosted at the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library located in Oakland, California, USA. During the pandemic, and probably afterwards, we will meet digitally by Zoom, although we will still solicit donations in support of the work of the Marxist Library. For over a decade and a half, we've been having these Sunday morning at the Marxist Library programs. Excuse me. We've been a platform for a diverse number of presentations on a variety of topics. We have consciously, and I hope successfully, cultivated a culture of mutual respect and the understanding that we do not necessarily agree on all matters. Rather, this is a comradely forum for political discourse and debate. The opinions expressed here are those of the participants. They do not represent the ICSS or the Marxist Library. However, one thing we're united on is our respect for the work of Karl Marx. We believe that his work remains relevant today. Our motto, taken from Karl Marx's 11th thesis on Feuerbach, is the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. We have a great program for you today, a really exciting program. Our speaker today is Bruce Gagnon, and he will be speaking on Master of Space, Corporate Plans for the Militarization and Privatization of Space. Bruce is the coordinator and co-founder of the Global Action Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. He is a Vietnam War era veteran and began his organizing work with the United Farm Workers Union, and he lives in Bath, Maine. We want to welcome you, Bruce. One of the things as far as the program goes is that he will be speaking for about an hour, after which we'll take a short break for announcements and to solicit donations for ICSS and the library. Following that, we will have about an hour of question and answer period where we'll open up the mic to people in the audience. If you want to participate, you should go to the participants window and raise your hand, and we will call on people in order. We'll do the best we can to give everybody a chance to speak. So with that being said, Bruce, I want to welcome you. I'm going to share my screen to bring up your presentation. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be with you all. You sound like a fun group, and I'm happy to be speaking with you today.
Can you see my your slides rather?
Yeah.
Yes, yep. It is up there. Great. Thank you.
Okay, good. There you go.
All right. Well, let me start by saying that the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space was created in 1992. At that time, I was coordinating the Florida Coalition for Peace and Justice, where we were organizing around the Space Center at Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center in Florida, constantly protesting various launches that were going on, military launches, NASA plutonium launches. And it was clear to us that this issue of Star Wars that really got going during the Reagan administration under SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, it was clear that this was getting bigger quickly. and was becoming international. And so ourselves and our friends in Colorado Springs, the Citizens for Peace and Space, we were really the only two local groups in the country at that time, and really almost the same today, that were working on these issues. And then also journalist and journalism professor Carl Grossman from New York. So the three of us put our heads together and created the Global Network in 1992. And I've been coordinating it ever since. So I want to share with you some of the things that we've learned over the years about where things are going with the space program. But first, let's go back and look at the origins of the US space program. Let's go to the next slide, Alan. Slide number 2, please.
Can you see the slide?
Nope. Still seeing the first. Still seeing the first one.
Okay.
There you go. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
This is a book about Operation Paperclip. Some of you might be aware of it. Where after World War II, the United States smuggled about 1,500 Nazi operatives into the US and seeded the military-industrial complex with them. Everything from Wernher von Braun and the rocket scientists and engineers to German scientists that were doing experimentation with prisoners of war, Jews, other people for mind control. There were the military operatives who were working on medical, military consequences of various things like freezing temperatures, its effect on pilots. So all kinds of different military applications. They seeded the US military industrial complex. This is a book by former CNN reporter Linda Hunt, where she tells really the overview, the best book I've read on the subject. This is her book, Secret Agenda. Okay, go to the next one, please. Here's Wernher von Braun at the time working for the Nazis. He was a member of the SS. This was, of course, during the war before he was brought to the US. All right, next one. This is Wernher von Braun with Major General Walter Dornberger. Dornberger's job was to be Hitler's liaison to von Braun and the rocket team. And he also came over to the United States after the end of the war. And his job, he went to work for Bell Aerospace in New York. He became vice president. And in the 1950s, Dornberger testified before the Congress of the United States saying, "Gentlemen, I didn't come to this country to lose the Third World War. I lost 2 already." And he gave the Congress his vision of orbiting battle stations in space that the US would be able to utilize to not only control the Earth below on behalf of corporate interests, but also, I think more importantly, to be able to control the pathway on and off the planet Earth. Because of what they call the Earth-Moon gravity well. Think of it like a wishing well. Someone's down inside the bottom of a well, but you're at the top. Because of gravity, you have the advantage. And Dornberger told the Congress that with orbiting battle stations in space, the US would be able to control the pathway, or the front gate, if you will, on and off the planet Earth. Okay, go to the next one. The U-2 rocket, the V-2 rocket, was used to terrorize the cities of London and Paris and Brussels at the end of World War II. And after the war, under Operation Paperclip, the US brought 100 copies of the V-2 to the United States, first to New Mexico, but then ultimately to Huntsville, Alabama, where the Redstone Arsenal became the headquarters for von Braun and his team and the US space program. Okay. But during the war, the Nazis had an underground tunnel called Dora inside the Harz Mountains in Germany, where they had about 25,000 Jews, gypsies, communists, French people, prisoners of war, even an American was there. And they were slaves working on the rocket effort on behalf of the Nazis. Some of them began to sabotage the operation by leaving screws unturned and urinating on the wires. And the Nazis rounded up 100 people and hung them just to make all the prisoners of war clear that there would be none of this sabotage of the operation. The Allies eventually closed in on this place as the war came to an end. And when they arrived, they found thousands, tens of thousands of people, bodies that had been, people had died. Some had been burned up in the ovens. Others were just laying around in sort of mass graves. Okay. So this was the rocket team that was brought to the US, first to Texas, then to White Sands, New Mexico, and then again, ultimately to Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. Okay. This is von Braun with his overseers, the US military, and several of the former Nazis. NASA was seated. One of the top operatives of NASA was one of the former Nazis. And so various aspects of the US space program from the early days were seated with these former Nazi operatives. Okay. This is a very important book that was written in the late 1980s, Military Space Forces, the next 50 years. In here, they talk very clearly about this agenda of using nuclear power for a power source for weapons in space, and also this goal of this Earth-Moon gravity well, controlling it on behalf of the US military. So the actual vision of the Nazis made it into this book. It was a congressional study. The foreword of it is signed by various politicians like John Glenn, former astronaut, also US Senator from Ohio. Bill Nelson went up on the space shuttle. He was the congressman and senator. He was congressman from Cape Canaveral, and then he became a senator in Florida. Former Ohio congressman and later governor, what's his name? Anyway, ran for president in the last round. I can't think of his name offhand, but a whole series of US leading Republican and Democrat politicians basically endorsing this Nazi vision, if you will. Okay. The US Space Command was created in 1997. They published this vision for 2020 that talks about US control and domination of space. And inside of this brochure, they say that the US will deny other countries access to space, and that the US will be, okay, next slide. US will be the master of space. And this is the Space Command headquarters at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the 50th Space Wing. And their logo, which they wear as a patch on their uniform, master of space. I like to call it master of disaster. But when you think about it, there's so much similarity between master of space and Deutschland über alles. Okay. So today, military satellites basically control all of US warfighting operations. No matter whether you're a troop on the ground, breaking down doors in Baghdad or in Afghanistan, or whether you're in a tank or whether you're on a ship or a plane, everything the military does today is coordinated and directed by space satellites. When the US launched the first war, the Persian Gulf War in the early 90s in Iraq, in the early days, space satellites pre-identified all of Saddam Hussein's military targets including the cables, the communication cables that ran underneath the desert sand. And in the first several hours of that operation that lasted for weeks, they bombed 95% of the targets that had been pre-identified. And then again in 2003, when George Bush launched the shock and awe attack on Iraq, in the initial attack, 70-some% of the US weapons, offensive weapons, were directed to their targets by military satellites, okay? So this is just one more illustration of how all US military operations on the ground, in the sea, in the air are directed by these military satellites, okay? But when you have these military satellites operating, you have to also have ground stations in the US and around the world to talk to the satellites and relay their signals in real time, split-second time, as those satellites orbit the Earth. And so here are the Space Command locations in the US, next slide, and the Space Command locations around the world. So these again are the key relay stations at these places that the US uses to relay this information back to everything in the US. What we discovered in the early days of the global network was that most of these places around the world, there are peace groups that were started saying, we don't want our country to be involved in the US Star Wars program. And so these local peace groups became the initial and strongest elements of the global network to this very day, okay? Buckley Air Force Base in Colorado is one of the primary destinations of the information that is relayed by satellites from around the world to the US. It's one of the primary destinations of all this military and intelligence communications, okay? This is a place up in, it's called Filing Dales. It's a radar up in northern England. Several peace groups are located up there that are the basis, the strength of the global network. In fact, our chair lives in this area himself. This particular radar station intercepts all information about Russian military operations, and it plays a key role in US preparation for first strike attack, which something which the United States annually war games, first strike attack against Russia and China. So this particular installation would help direct a first strike attack on Russia, okay? Cape Cod, Massachusetts, again, plays a key role in intercepting information about so-called enemy military operations, and also would play a key role in targeting operations, all right? Crowton Air Force Base in England is it's near Oxford in England. It plays a key role in intercepting all military communications, intelligence communications from throughout the Middle East and Africa. And it plays a key role in directing the US drone program in those regions, Middle East and Africa, and intercepting lots and lots of spy intelligence information, okay? In northern Sweden, the United States and NATO now have a huge military test facility and satellite intelligence communication operation there. Sweden, even though it's not a NATO member, has been brought in as a NATO partner. And so this whole region is being particularly militarized because of its proximity to Russia, okay? Kwajalein Atoll, a US military installation in the Pacific, is a major targeting center. It's where missiles are tested and where targeting information is developed to prepare for attacks on China and North Korea, okay? This is a US Navy military communications base in Sicily. We've gone there to meet with the peace activists there. There's a very strong movement in Sicily to oppose this particular place that was built on top of a nature preserve. People are very angry about it. It plays a key role in the US war in Africa, particularly the drone program, and in parts of the Middle East as well, okay? Menwith Hill and also up in Yorkshire is an NSA spy base that intercepts all phone, fax, and email communications from all of Europe. The US has been caught doing espionage efforts from here, industrial espionage, where the United States spies on European corporate bidding processes and then gives that information to American corporations so they can underbid on European contracts. They've been caught dead in the tracks doing this. So anyway, it's a very significant US spy base up in Northern England, all right? This is another US spy base in New Zealand. You'll see that one of these covers is deflated when some peace activists took some sickles and went in there some years ago and deflated them. They were, of course, arrested and jailed. But there's a very strong peace movement in New Zealand opposing US military operations there. They've now built a spaceport there that they're using to launch many US military satellites from, okay? This is one of the more significant US spy bases. It intercepts all phone, fax, and email communications in the Asia Pacific, just like Menwith Hill does in Europe. This Pine Gap base does in Australia. You might have seen a Netflix series called Pine Gap about this particular place. They also do major drone targeting in the Middle East and Africa, also from this base in Australia. So originally, they called it Five Eyes. The US was working with England, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand to develop this international spy operation, NSA, military targeting, and everything else. But then it grew by adding Denmark, France, Holland, and Norway. And now it's grown even bigger to 14 eyes, adding Germany, Belgium, Italy, Sweden, and Spain. So almost all of NATO and NATO members and partners are involved in this massive US intelligence, military targeting space operation around the world, okay? And so the US Space Command was in charge of this whole operation for many, many years. But now, just recently, during the Trump administration, next slide, we've gone to the Space Force. And the Space Force, as you might know, passed through the Democratic-controlled Congress overwhelmingly. The Democrats' only question, only demand when it came time to vote on the Space Force was that they wanted to call it the Space Corps rather than the Space Force. Something sounded a little more benign. So this, in fact, indicates that both parties are absolutely on board with this whole plan for the United States to be the master of space. Okay, now I want to just share some of the programs that the Space Command and the Space Force have been developing for offensive technologies. This is what they call the successor to the shuttle, the X-37, the military space plane. It has shown the ability to stay in space for a year at a time. It's basically a super drone orbiting the planet, doing surveillance, reconnaissance. It has the ability to open its bay doors and swing out an arm and reach out and capture another country's military satellite, so it has a anti-satellite weapons capability. And then it also has the ability to fly down from orbit as it returns to Earth and help drop an attack in a first strike on a particular country, particularly Russia or China. I mentioned earlier that the US Space Command has been annually wargaming a first strike attack on Russia and China for many, many years. I've read about it several times in the Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine. And in one of those war games, the very first weapon system to initiate the attack was this particular X-37, the military space plane. Russia and China long ago said they would never do a first strike under any circumstances, but would only use their nuclear weapons in a retaliation after a US first strike attack. The US to this day refuses to rule out first strike attack. Okay. This is what's called the Rods from God program. These are tungsten steel rods that are being dropped from an orbiting satellite. They would gather speed as they return into Earth, towards Earth, and they would be used to essentially go underground and destroy any Russian or Chinese underground command centers or underground nuclear bunkers where their nuclear weapons are stored. So one very dangerous offensive weapon system. Now, the Russians and Chinese for more than 25 or 30 years have been going to the United Nations saying, look, let's create a new treaty to ban all weapons in space. Let's close the door to the barn before the horse gets out. There was a treaty in 1967 created at the UN called the Outer Space Treaty. But at the time, it only limited the use of nuclear weapons orbiting the planet because that was the fear at the time. So that treaty was created in 67. So the new technologies today, according to US military legal people, these new technologies fall outside of the old treaty because they're weapons of selective destruction, not weapons of mass destruction. The Outer Space Treaty only outlawed weapons of mass destruction. And so the Russians and Chinese have been saying, let's get a new treaty. So every year they've gone to the UN and introduced a treaty called PAROS, P-A-R-O-S, Prevention of an Arms Race in Outer Space. And every year, the US and Israel vote against it at the General Assembly, where it passes overwhelmingly as a resolution. And then that resolution is sent to Geneva to the United Nations Permanent Conference on Disarmament for negotiations, for treaty negotiations. And there, the US and Israel blocked the treaty through Republican and Democrat administrations, through Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump. All of them blocked this treaty from being developed. Why? Because the US says, hey, there's no problem. There are no weapons in space. And they want to be the master of space. They don't want any inhibition, any treaty to inhibit their program. Next slide. They've long wanted to put in space orbiting battle stations that would fire lasers and hit targets in space, destroying other countries' satellites, and also hitting targets on the Earth below. The one thing they need is massive power projection. And this is where they want to put nuclear reactors as an onboard power source in order to create the energy to fire the lasers. Okay. This is Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, where they have the Space Laser Directorate for the US Air Force. And they're working on a laser that can fire from Earth into space to destroy other countries' satellites in space. This has been tested many times by the US, okay? And then one last program that is really right now on steroids is Cyber Command. The US used cyber warfare the first time when Bill Clinton was president. You might remember the US-NATO war on Yugoslavia to break Yugoslavia up, to balkanize it, to break it into pieces into smaller countries right after the fall of the former Soviet Union. And in that, before that war began, the US cyber, it was before the Cyber Command was created, but the cyber operations of the US military essentially crawled inside of Yugoslavia's Air Defense Command, where they would defend themselves against attacks by aircraft from another country. The US crawled inside of Yugoslavia's computers, shut it down, so that when the US and NATO were bombing Belgrade, you remember they hit the Chinese embassy and said, "Oh, sorry, mistake, we were using the wrong maps." I doubt it. I think it was a warning to China at the time. They bombed television stations, they bombed hospitals, all kinds of civilian targets in Belgrade. But not one plane was shot down because Yugoslavia had no air defense capability. And so coming out of that war, I read about, again, all of this in the industry publications, Space News and Aviation Week and Space Technology. Coming out of there, the US really upped the cyber activities and then created the Cyber Command that they have today that's in charge of this whole program. Okay. And now, as I said earlier, they've created the Space Force. This is our newsletter, Space Alert, that's currently, this is our last edition. Our latest edition is now at the printer. And in fact, if you'd like me to send you a copy, I'll be very happy to do so. I put our email in the chat box. You can just send me an email, say you'd like to receive this paper copy of our newsletter. I'll mail it to you. If you don't want to do it that way, you can go to our website. The website address is also in the chat box, and you can read it online. All right. So that's the Space Force today, this new arm of the US space program to bring offense to space, to bring domination to the earth below on behalf of corporate globalization, and to control the pathway on and off the planet Earth on behalf of those same corporate interests. All right. Another key program of the US Space Command is so-called missile defense. It's a key element in US first strike attack. The former ABM treaty that the US had with Russia, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, outlawed missile defense. Missile defense is basically a shield. The idea is first you launch a first strike attack on Russia or China, and then whatever remaining retaliatory capability they have left, they then fire that, and you try to intercept it with missile defense interceptors, giving you a quote unquote successful first strike attack. So this is a provocative advancement in the arms race, the introduction of missile defense. And that's why it was outlawed during the Cold War, because remember, we had MAD, mutual assured destruction. Both sides could blow each other up. So there was kind of a rough equivalence and in a way, a crazy stability. But then with the withdrawal of the ABM treaty by George W. Bush in 2002, and then under Obama, a massive escalation of creation of missile defense systems with deployments encircling Russia and China today, this created a new level in the arms race, a new danger. And so in order to make missile defense work, if you can just scroll down a little bit in that slide, Alan, you'll see these ground stations and radars that the United States has deployed around the world that coordinate and direct this whole missile defense program. Again, all of these places are basically encircling Russia and China and talking to places in the United States that then coordinate the program. Okay, go ahead. So missile defense basically has three layers. The first one on the left, boost phase. In other words, soon after someone launches a retaliatory strike, here you see a warship, an Aegis Destroyer, made in Bath, Maine, where I live. And right next to the ship, you see a missile called SM-3, Standard Missile 3. This interceptor missile is on board this Aegis Destroyer, and they get real close to Russia and China. So after a US first strike attack, and they try to launch their remaining retaliatory capability at the US, they then have these missile defense systems that are close to them try to take out the retaliatory strike in the boost phase or the initial ascent phase. And then in the mid-course phase, when something gets way up into the atmosphere, traveling at 15,000 miles an hour, they have another system of interceptors that are based in Alaska and in California that would try to take out the retaliatory strike in the mid-course phase. And then in the terminal phase, three primary programs. The PAC-3 program, on the right side, you'll see it in the terminal phase, the THAAD program, and again, the Aegis program that also can work in both the beginning and the end stage of any retaliatory interception. So all of these programs now are deployed and in operation. The best testing of all of them are the ones launched by the Aegis warships. These SM-3 missiles have the best record of success in testing program. The mid-course ground-based one for deep space is never going to work. It's the one that can't identify between the real missile and decoys. And because of the speed at 15,000 miles an hour, it's hard to intercept. And then the THAAD program in particular is a very aggressive program that's being deployed in Japan and South Korea right now. So these are the three elements of missile defense for the United States and NATO, okay? This is a picture of the THAAD program, a ground-based missile defense launcher, being sent into a melon farming community that has been totally disrupted by building a launch base for these THAAD systems in South Korea. And every time they truck in new systems to upgrade this base, people in this little farming community and their supporters from all over South Korea come to protest, and they bring in literally thousands of police to hold the people back in order to get these THAAD missiles into this base in South Korea. So this missile defense system is driving massive opposition in places where it's being deployed around the world, okay? This is the Aegis Destroyer launching these missile defense interceptors. Again, these ships are made in my hometown of Bath, Maine, okay? Because the Aegis warships have the best testing program, the United States said, well, gee, why don't we put this Aegis system on land as well? And so they've created this program, Aegis Ashore. And so they have a testing platform for Aegis Ashore on the island of Kauai in Hawaii. And now they've deployed this as an operational launch center on land in Romania and in Poland. And this is the picture of the one in Romania. Okay, next slide. This is the Poland groundbreaking, where the US and Navy and who oversees the Aegis Ashore program and the Polish government groundbreaking for this ground-based system, okay? And so the US is really boxing in Russia and China again with these missile defense systems. Go back one slide, please. Here in Romania and Poland, this launch facility, this Aegis ashore, can not only launch this missile defense interceptor, but they can also launch a first strike attack Tomahawk cruise missile from the same launch tubes. Just like on the Navy warships, the Aegis destroyers, they launch cruise missiles and they launch these SM-3 interceptor missiles from the same launch tubes. So it's also it's supposedly a missile defense system, but it also has offensive capabilities. And so from this Poland and Romania, this nuclear capable, these Tomahawk cruise missiles can carry nuclear warheads on board, and they can reach from Poland and Romania. They can hit Moscow in 10 minutes time. And if you know anything about cruise missiles, they're radar evading. They fly at treetop level, evading radar detection. And so they're very provocative, very dangerous, very destabilizing. And Russia is then forced to put their launch on their missiles on launch on warning status. They can't afford to really find out whether it's a flock of geese, some kind of mistake, or if it's a real attack. All right. So again, both Russia and China are being surrounded with these systems today. Okay. Next one. So it was Bill Clinton during his time in office that began the escalation of NATO. You might recall that when the former Soviet Union collapsed during the early 90s, George Herbert Walker Bush was president, and his Secretary of State, Jim Baker, was in negotiations with Mikhail Gorbachev over this idea of the reunification of Germany. And the Russians had one concern. If Germany is reunified, will NATO still exist, or will it ever be enlarged to come at us? Because the Russians got rid of their old Warsaw Pact alliance that basically was a way of keeping the West away from them, a way of protecting themselves as sort of a border guard, if you will, of the West. And so it was Jim Baker, Secretary of State, that promised Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward towards Russia. But it was Bill Clinton that broke that promise and began the encirclement of Russia with the expansion of NATO, okay? And so today, as you can see from this map, that since the reunification of Germany, NATO is now expanded into Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, trying to get into Ukraine, trying to get into Georgia. And Russia is really freaking out over it, all right? The US and NATO are now moving military operations into the Arctic Sea. Recently, just in the last couple of weeks, the US has declared that they're creating a army brigade to move into the Arctic. They're creating, they've sent US warships up into the Barents Sea and the Bering Sea in order to begin to move into that region, all right? I would submit that one of the key reasons for the US military posture against Russia, and especially the demonization of Russia that we see today, is because of climate change. If you look at the Arctic Ocean, you see that Russia has the largest border with the Arctic on the planet. And just today, I posted on my Facebook page and the Global Network's Facebook page, if you check them out, you will see I copied a Rand Corporation study. And you remember the Rand Corporation, the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War, a new Rand Corporation study calling for the Balkanization of Russia, the breaking it up into smaller countries so that the Western fossil fuel corporations will have an easier time to get access to the Arctic Ocean as the Arctic ice melts, and the corporations can now drill, baby drill in the region. So I believe this is what's driving so much of the Russia demonization today. All right, next slide. And so recently, in the last, I would say 10 years, we've seen a dramatic escalation of US military, especially US NATO military war games, encroaching closer and closer to the Russian border, all right? Also, the US and NATO are having increasingly war games up in the Nordic region, up in Sweden, Finland, Norway region, right along the Russian border, all right? And every time when the United States has these war games, the US sends over on these big cargo ships all kinds of military hardware. And after the war game is over, go ahead to the next one. The last slide was Norway war game. And this is a military hub in Poland that has been created by the US. They leave the equipment there. And so in Norway and in Poland now, on both areas right near the Russian border, the US is creating this major weapons hub of all kinds of weapons technologies that they're leaving there in preparation for war with Russia, okay? One of my friends, a great artist, Will Park from Florida, who I worked with for more than 25 years, drew this illustration. Here the US holding these interceptor missiles, Uncle Sam holding these interceptor missiles in his hand, saying, what the hell are you doing getting so close to your own border? Because when the US holds war games right up against the Russian border, Russia moves its military close to that borderline. And what we hear in the Western media is, oh, look at Russia being aggressive, moving its its military operations near Ukraine or near Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, et cetera, but it's just a reaction to what the United States and NATO are doing. But this is how the Western media continues to spin the whole story, okay? And the same thing is going on in the Asia Pacific with China. You remember when Obama was president and Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, they came up with the pivot to the Asia Pacific, moving a high preponderance of US military forces, air, land, and sea forces into the Asia Pacific to encircle China. And as it turns out, Russia as well, because Russia also has territory there. Okay, next slide. If you can just scroll down a little bit first, we'll start at the top. We'll start in Japan, Korea, Philippines, Guam, Singapore, and now scroll down a bit. Australia. The United States is increasing dramatically its military operation, more ground troops, more aircraft, more planes, more missile defense systems. My son actually lives in Taiwan. He's a teacher there. And the US is increasingly militarizing Taiwan, breaking the long ago promise that the United States would not recognize Taiwan, would not interfere in China-Taiwan relations. The United States is now breaking that promise, just as we broke the promise that the US would not expand NATO towards Russia. So this entire region is becoming increasingly dramatically militarized by the US. I've been on several Veterans for Peace delegations that went to Okinawa, where the United States is doing major military escalation in Okinawa as well. We also took a Veterans for Peace delegation to Korea as well to see some of these bases. Okay, next slide. This is Jeju Island. Some of you might have heard about it. This was a small 1,500 person fishing and farming village, 500 years old, that the United States forced the South Korean government to build a Navy base. And so for now, well over 10 years, every single day, there have been protests at this during the construction and now the operation of this Navy base. And the US is now sending aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, Aegis Destroyers to this base in Korea. And the people continue still to protest against this operation. Okay. So now let's get off the planet. This book, Mining the Sky, Untold Riches from the Asteroids, Comets, and Planets. Written by a NASA scientist, says basically there's gold on the asteroids, there's magnesium and cobalt and uranium on Mars. Come to find out, Halliburton Corporation has created a drilling mechanism to mine Mars. These robots that we're told are driving around Mars looking for the origins of life. Actually, what they're doing is doing soil sampling. They're doing mapping of Mars. They're doing basically looking for mining possibilities for mining operations on Mars. They want to have nuclear powered mining colonies on the moon, on Mars, on asteroids. On the moon, they say there's helium-3, which could make the profits of the oil corporations look like nothing if they can mine it and bring it back to the Earth. So there's all kinds of opportunities. And during the Obama administration, violating the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 that also says that no country, no corporation, no individual can make land claims on any of the planetary bodies. They were trying to preempt the global war system that was created as the European powers all set off in their ships to conquer the new worlds, to look for new markets, to look for resources. And soon they were all cutting each other's throat, killing each other. That's what created the global war system on Earth that we have today. And so the UN very perceptively created the Outer Space Treaty and the Moon Treaty that also said nobody can claim ownership of the moon, because they wanted to get ahead of the curve and stop any tensions and war fighting in space, because they knew it would come back to harm us here on the Earth. But during the Obama administration, Obama signed a law violating the Outer Space Treaty and the Moon Treaty, saying American corporations may make land claims, may make ownership claims on planetary bodies. And so this broke the door open for the gold rush, for the privatization of space that we now see today, okay? And so again, they want to go out and mine Mars. Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. He wants to terraform Mars. I don't know if you're familiar with the word terraform. It means turn the dusty red planet into a beautiful, lush green planet like the Earth. And in order to terraform Mars, Elon Musk says he has to explode 10,000 nuclear weapons in the Martian atmosphere in order to heat up the planet to make terraforming possible. Now, just put your head around that. launching 10,000 nuclear weapons manufactured at Department of Energy laboratories across the United States that have a historic bad track record of polluting water and land and workers at these DOE labs, then launching them on rockets that blow up from time to time from Cape Canaveral into space. It's unbelievably, it's insane, it's incredible. But this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing today. And Elon Musk just got a contract from the Space Force to launch military rockets, to launch military satellites into space. So Musk and the Space Force are now wed. So this thing is maybe not so far-fetched. It's unbelievable. Go ahead, next slide. In order to get to Mars, it takes currently a year with conventional rocket technology. And they say astronauts' bodies would turn to jello because of space radiation. And so they need to cut in half the amount of time it takes to get there. And so they say nuclear rockets with nuclear reactors for engines would make it possible to get to Mars quicker. And so again, who would make the nuclear reactors? Well, it would be the DOE labs, Department of Energy laboratories. So the nuclear industry views space as a wonderful new market, unlimited potential, unlimited profits with nuclear reactors for rockets, nuclear bombs exploding over Mars, nuclear-powered mining colonies on the moon and Mars and other places. The nuclear industry is dying to get a hold of space. All right, next. So SpaceX, the corporation that Elon Musk runs, has created these two t-shirts. It's on their website. This is where we took these from their website. Nuke Mars and Occupy Mars. All right, next slide. One other problem that is severely happening today is because of all the satellite launches that are happening. You hear about them more and more all the time. More places are needed because Elon Musk wants to launch up to 80,000 mini satellites into space. And there's not enough launch sites on the Earth now just to continually launch all these places. So they're going around the world to New Zealand, to Kodiak Island, Alaska, to Scotland, and many, many, many other places saying, we want to build launch sites here to launch all these satellites. But the problem is the orbits are like a parking lot and they're getting crowded. And increasingly, as orbits get crowded, because of the crowded orbits and the already persistent space junk problem, space debris problem that comes from all these years of space operations. Last year, the International Space Station had to be moved 3 times because they were tracking space junk that was coming dangerously close. So now as they are going to have all these extra launches for 5G and military and civilian launches, it becomes even a greater problem. They want to have, they say, a 5G satellite over every person's head on the planet at every moment, 24 hours a day. Now, just imagine that. Imagine all those satellites that would be required to be launched. And that's why these folks are out going all over the world now, trying to get more launch facilities in various countries because they need to launch more of these military and 5G satellites. 5G will also give the military new speed capability to do what they do because, you know, at faster speeds and everything else. So 5G is very much related also to the whole militarization of space program. All right. So in the end, I wanted to just talk about who's the real aggressor out there. We hear that Russia and China are trying to take over the world. But one of the slides that sadly you're not going to be able to see is a breakdown of global military spending. who around the world is spending what. And the United States is spending about 35% of the global total. When you add the NATO countries' spending, military spending, it's well over 50% of the world total. Russia spending 4% of the world total on military. And in fact, the last 2 years, Russia cut their military budget. So, and China's around 12 or 13% of the global total. So it's really clear to me who's really driving this new arms race and this madness that we have today. So in the end, I want to recommend a film for all of you. I hope you'll write this down. It's a documentary film made by a French-Canadian filmmaker that has won awards. It ran on public television in Canada, throughout Europe, was in the movie theaters in Latin America, but he could never get a distribution deal in the United States. He was completely blocked from showing this documentary about this issue in the United States. It's called Pax, P-A-X, Pax Americana and the Weaponization of Space. Pax Americana and the Weaponization of Space. If you go to YouTube, you'll find it. The Global Network has a YouTube page. You can find it there on our, just search for Global Network, YouTube. You should be able to find our page, Pax Americana and the Weaponization of Space. It goes through most of the things I've talked about here and gives you a much better view of it all. So I'll stop there and thank you again, and be ready for any questions you might have. I think Alan needs to be unmuted, right?
Yep, Alan needs to unmute himself.
Okay, wow. I can see why that presentation had to be disrupted. It was incredibly informative and really something. Thank you so much.
Fortunately, they didn't get to it sooner.
Yeah, fortunately, yeah. Well, we're going to deal with that in upcoming, our next meetings. Thank you, Bruce. That was just an amazingly informative presentation. What we're going to do now is take a short break. I think I'm going to actually ask Roger to talk about next week's program. So I think he's kind of aware of what's going on. Roger, if you want to go ahead. If you want to make me co-host also, Mehmet, that would be good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to run to the toilet, all right? While you do that.
You want to unmute, Roger?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Just a minute. Two things at once. Just a minute. There you go, Roger.
Okay, thank you for unmuting me. Yes, next week we're going to have Danny Shaw speak. Danny is a professor at the City College of New York, and he has a long history of movement involvement. He's going to speak on the topic of drugs plus capitalism equals genocide. And that's a title that the Black Panthers originally coined. And it talks about the relationship of capitalism to the psyche of America and some of the problems. It should be a very exciting program. Danny, besides being a professor of Latin American studies and a political activist, is a heavyweight boxing champion. He twice fought in Madison Square Garden for the New York City Golden Glove heavyweight championship. He lost both of those bouts. And he is a very exciting speaker, and we'll be very much looking forward to having him next week. So thank you for this opportunity to tell you about next week's program.
Thank you, Roger. Richard, you want to just say a few words about fundraising?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we are still continuing to fundraise both for the ICSS and our physical home, the Niebel Proctor Library. I posted at the beginning of the chat some information on how to contribute either through PayPal or through a check, mail check. A number of people have been starting to contribute on a regular basis. They set up recurring PayPal or bill pay through their banks checks, so that it's a sort of no-brainer. You know, we're looking for not a great deal of money. Of course, we could handle several billion like our enemies, and we could do a lot. But we'll settle for a small amount. $5, $10 a month would be great, and you can have your bank do all the work, or PayPal do all the work, and you don't have to think about it once you set up. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, what we're going to do now is...
Alan, just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Richard, if you don't mind, can you please post the information once again to chat? Because if it was done before 10:30, or if people participate, they will not be able to see it. Thank you.
Okay. What we're going to do now is open up for questions and comments. And the way we'll do this is if you go to the participants window in Zoom, raise your hand. We'll call on everybody in order. And we would ask you to please limit your comments and questions to about 2 minutes. We'll give you a notification if you run past that time. And then we're going to allow Bruce to comment and answer questions with no time limit. We'll do that for probably till around 12:30. So go ahead and please raise your hand. We encourage everybody to go ahead. I didn't see how the hands went up, but I'm going to start with Richard W., if you would please. Richard, go ahead and unmute yourself.
They can or not?
I asked him. Yeah, he's unmuted.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and could you enable the chat window as well? Or,
I think it is enabled, no?
Mine's showing disabled.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. So Bruce, thank you very much for your presentation. There's a lot to take in there, and I know you just barely touched the surface. My question to you is, I remember I remember what's his name, Brian Williams, quoting Leonard Cohen, watching these cruise missiles going off from the Aegis Destroyer, or cruisers actually, and quoting being blinded by the beauty of the light, and it was terrible. My question is, on the other side, the Russians announced a couple years ago about about a half a dozen significant developments in so-called hyperkinetic weapons. And shortly after those cruise missiles went into Syria, but they didn't seem to do a whole lot of damage. And you never really heard much about any more cruise missiles going into Syria. And at the time, I think there was some plausible explanation that the Russians were basically shooting them down through some of their new developments. Could you speak to the hyperkinetic element here, just briefly, if you would? Thank you.
Yeah, hypersonic.
Hypersonic, yes.
Yeah. You remember during World War II, the French created the Maginot Line? These sort of like almost gravestones that were going to protect them from the onslaught of Nazi tanks. And what did the Nazis do? They just kind of went around it, right? So here we have the United States withdrawing from treaties like crazy, not just during the Trump administration, but even before. And Russia was, and Russia being surrounded with so-called missile defense systems. And so Russia is saying, we've got to figure out a way to be able to get around this missile defense system so that we have a credible retaliatory capability, so the United States won't be so eager to use this stuff thinking that they can take us out in a first strike attack. And so hypersonic missiles are a new technology that are flying at a faster speed than ever. I think it's like Mach 8 or something to that effect, have the ability to change course in all kinds of ways so that they can't be intercepted or even really detected. And so it's a new escalation in the arms race. Whether they took out any cruise missiles over Syria, I don't know. I have no idea. But I will tell you this, that I've actually seen Putin say that if the United States will return for discussion on the New START, you know, the New START treaty, the only treaty left that runs out next month between the US and Russia, that regulates the numbers of nuclear weapons. Putin said if the United States will return to the New START negotiations, then everything is on the table, including our hypersonic missiles. We see them as a deterrent capability, not as a first strike capability. So that's the Russian position. I've been hearing the Russians and Chinese governments say for the last 10 years that by the United States bringing along and surrounding us these missile defense systems, it's a way of reducing our ability to retaliate against a US first strike attack. And that puts in danger future arms control, because we don't have, Russia and China saying, we don't have an incentive to reduce our nuclear missiles when you're putting our retaliatory capability in danger because of missile defense. So that's where we are today. Crucial moment.
Okay, next up is Nina, followed by Roger, and then Mehmet. And I would encourage everybody to please go to participants window, ask your question, raise your hand. Nina, if you would unmute.
Okay. I'm just curious about the hacking that came in. Do you have any idea why it was racially based or who it might be?
Well, we got broken into. You know, I'm sure that they've targeted us. We're going to be putting in effect some stricter security measures. So,
and not only that, but you know, I think people who are for this, you know, who are against the weaponization, it's not far-fetched to see that they are also very racist and, you know, warmongering and all of the rest. So it doesn't surprise me, but that's their level. You know,
yeah, I guess I was surprised they were paying attention.
Well, I think it shows how important what we're doing is. And I think this is one of the places where you can really hear this kind of message.
Exactly.
That's really important.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Next up is Roger. If you would unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you, Bruce. It's a very important program you just gave us, and very much appreciated it. I had one fact check question, and then I also had a longer question. On the fact check, I think I heard you say that China and Russia both have a no first strike policy. And I believe that was true in 1982 when Brezhnev made the no strike pledge. But I think that subsequently in 1993, Russia decided not to have a no strike policy in response to the overwhelming US aggressive policy against them. So if you could comment on that, I'd appreciate that. The other question has to do with Operation Paperclip. I've heard of it, of course, but your presentation made me think a little bit about the political background to it. So we know that some 100 Nazis joined the US military operation. That's the facts of the matter. But I was wondering about the politics behind that, because these people were in a deadly war against the United States. So they joined their enemy. So was there some sort of ideological unity between these scientists and the US military? And how is that actualized in the actual transfer of these Nazis into an integration into the American war machine? So those are the two questions. Thank you.
The first question on first strike, it's my understanding that Russia and China, I have seen this continually in recent years up to the present, that they continue to say that they do not have a first strike attack policy. But Vladimir Putin has made it very clear that if they were attacked, if they were invaded, or if they were attacked in a first strike attack, that they would then use their nuclear missiles in response. And Putin says this, quote, "What kind of a world would it be without Russia?" Okay. And so they're very clear that if you do attack us, we're not looking for a fight, but if you do attack us, we will come at you with everything we have. So that's both the Russian and Chinese policy at this time. The Nazis, Operation Paperclip was 1,500 Nazis were brought over to see throughout the military-industrial complex. The rocket team was 100 scientists and engineers, but 1,400 more. There was a guy that worked for Jane's Defense Weekly. It's kind of one of the Bibles of the military-industrial complex. He did a story a few years ago about the Operation Paperclip. And he was really interested in the black budget. You've heard about the black budget, the secret Pentagon budget. No one, even in Congress, is allowed to know how much they actually have, where they do secret military research, mostly on space weapons technologies. So he did a whole research project, and he discovered that it came from Hitler. Hitler had a black budget, a secret military, underground, unknown to the government budget. And when the Nazis came to the United States under Operation Paperclip, they brought along that black budget with them, that idea, that technique. And so in his article, he ends up by asking this question: was there an ideological contamination that came along with it? And so you have to wonder, right? I would answer absolutely, of course there was. And again, I go back to Master of Space and look at the clear similarity between Master of Space and Deutschland über alles. I don't think there's any denying that there was, in fact, an ideological contamination by the Nazis, but that doesn't excuse or in any way negate the reality that when you read books about the two brothers, Secretary of State and CIA Director, the Dulles brothers, they were Nazis. They were Nazis, Nazi sympathizers. They helped the creation of Hitler's military machine even before the war started. So there were people in this country, even prior to the war, that were ideologically similar to the Nazis as well.
Okay, next up is Mehmet, followed by Sharon, and then Jean. And I would encourage everybody to chime in if you have any questions. Raise your hand in the participants window, and then Raj.
Bruce, first of all, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. It was really, I learned a lot. My question is that today you touched on it for a little bit, how the space program is being presented as scientific, and it's only for the science, and look at humanity is gaining so much information, knowledge, so on and so forth. But we know that behind it is the military and, of course, the investment side of it. But I don't know if you have the numbers in front of you, but what would you say on a typical space, research rocket that goes up? What percent of it is that we know of as scientific, and what percent of it is being used for other purposes?
Well, that's a very important question, a very good question. I would say a high percentage. And I'll tell you a few stories just to illustrate. NASA, in its founding, said it was purely civilian. Well, that was a lie from the first day. It was cover. It was cover for the militarization of space. The International Space Station, they've always had a section of the the International Space Station that cost taxpayers $100 billion just to build. They've always had a section of it that was top secret, and that even though they had astronauts from other countries on the space station, there was always this one section where they were doing military space weapons, sensor testing and other kinds of testing on board. So virtually everything they do has always been what they call dual use, both military and civilian at the same time. But just to give you one example, some years ago, NASA did a mission called Clementine. They went to the moon, orbiting mission around the moon, and they fired a projectile from this orbiting mission into the surface of the moon. They said they were looking for the evidence of water underneath the moon's surface, the regolith, they call it, the regolith of the moon. They were looking to see if there was water there. So this projectile showed the ability to fire from an orbiting battle station, if you will, into the surface of the moon, go underground, and so what's the difference between doing that and orbiting the Earth and firing a projectile into Russia or China to target one of their underground nuclear, stations with a warhead on board this particular projectile? So this so-called civilian research mission was both civilian on one hand, looking for water, but also military on the other, because they were testing offensive capabilities. So these are the kind of things, and these are the ways they hide these missions over time.
Okay, next is Sharon, followed by Jean, followed by Raj. Sharon, if you would unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. It's my opinion and understanding that, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
It's my understanding that part of the explanation for the demise of the Soviet Union is the distortion of the socialist economy caused by the Russians having to militarize and engage in tit for tat with the United States over many decades, several decades or many decades. And now we have China responding in similar ways. I guess they feel they have to. Can you say more about what's going on in the South China Sea, or as some Filipino leftists / nationalists call it, the West Filipino Sea?
Well, China imports a huge amount of oil to run its growing economy. And the way they've always imported their oil was on ships from the Middle through the South China Sea into Chinese ports. Well, the United States, by escalating this pivot, this Asia pivot, increasing its own naval presence in the region, has essentially been trying to create the capability to block China's importation of oil, so that the US would essentially point a loaded gun at China's head and say, you either submit or we will hold your economy hostage. And this is what led China to begin to build these little Navy outposts on these sand spits in various places, so that they had more capability to essentially control that South China Sea, so they could move their importation of oil, because they saw the dangers that the United States had them, had them in a tight situation. And now what we see happening is Russia and China are building a land link to move Russian natural gas by pipeline all the way across Russia into China, so that they wouldn't be so vulnerable to this South China Sea U.S. blockade, if you will, similar to Cuba, blockade that the U.S. has done over the years. So this is, I think, what has been driving a lot of this tension in the region. But both Russia and China are, I think, have been really honest and clear about this particular point, that we are not getting on our knees. We are not surrendering to your control, you and NATO. We believe in a multipolar world where many nations make decisions, not this unipolar world that we have presently, that the US is desperately trying to hang on to. And the US knows the window is closing quickly. That China, Iran, Venezuela, many countries are rising. Their economies are rising, and the US control of the planet is over. And so that's why the US is such a dangerous giant right now, because it's desperate to hang on. And that's why I'm so worried in this moment, because, desperate people do crazy things sometimes.
Next up is Jean, followed by Raj. And again, I want to encourage people to raise your hand, ask questions. Great discussion so far. So Jean, if you would unmute.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Okay, well, thank you so much. I knew it was bad, but it's even worse. But I just want to say, first of all, I'm very proud that both Bruce and myself are members of the Veterans for Peace, which is the only organization, to my knowledge, which stands for the abolishment of war. Not just this or that war and so forth, but the abolishment of war itself. And I think most of us as Marxists understand that means also we need to have socialism. But, our East-Base chapter did pass a resolution, again, opposing both nuclear weapons and abolishing both nuclear weapons and nuclear power by the year 2020. Which is we need to revise. But also a resolution on Jeju Island in Korea. So we've been very active on this. And most recently, we formed a national VFP working group on China, and particularly the pivot to peace with China and the world. And that's one of our things we're pushing very hard. But I just wanted to say, partially on the Chinese nuclear weapons, Mao explicitly said, after they were threatened in the Taiwanese Strait and in Korea and elsewhere, they said, we need to have this thing or else they will bully us. And when they exploded their first nuclear weapons, they made a pledge that they would never use it against any non-nuclear power, and they would never use it be the first to use it. Absolutely. Under no conditions would they be the first to use it. And this has been pretty much verified by various observers who note that China has all its nuclear warheads separated from the means of delivery, the missiles. So they can't launch on warning like like we can. So I think that's really important in understanding the Chinese position on so much of this. But I'm also curious because I know that China has also not simply waiting for moves, but they are taking they have their own very powerful military. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is that one of the things that the Biden administration did is they invited officials from Taiwan to the inauguration. And this is very disturbing, let me just say that. So I just want to thank you so much. This was such a great talk.
Thank you.
Bruce, did you have a comment?
No, that's...
Oh, okay. All right, next up is Raj, followed by 9408. And again, I want to encourage people to please raise your hand, ask questions. Raj, unmute yourself, please, and ask your question.
So Bruce, first of all, thank you very much. Very informative presentation. A lot of work has gone into it, and we are the beneficiary. Thank you. I agree with you. I think the U.S. is a declining power in terms of its influence and as a declining capitalist power. And it wants to desperately keep that position, so the danger is there, and we all should try to stop. I don't know how much power we have, but to the extent it matters, I mean, it is a very important thing. So stopping that would be necessary. But my view is that, and I know, actually, I had a friend whose wife was British and whose father was in MI6, that's an external intelligence. And he was responsible for recruiting these scientists from Germany. And so I know from her that this was going on. I also know in Molotov's book, The Conversation, he said Wernher von Braun's house, he personally went with Beria to ask about it, and dressed as military people, and actually got hold of the material. And that's why the Soviet advance in rocketry speeded up afterwards. But Wernher von Braun actually escaped to the West, and maybe you know something about it. But my final comment on this is that really, I think, like the great empires, they don't get defeated in military by military. They go out through bankruptcy, and I think that's where the United States is headed. And in the meantime, that kind of containment by Russia and China is important. And by the way, only country other than the United States that I know of, two countries, do not have a second use. And one I'm not sure. Pakistan has first strike option, but of course puny. India has more, maybe the similar amount. It's not a big nuclear power, but it has a no first strike. China has no first strike, and Russia has no first strike. So the United States really is the only country with that kind of power. Anyway, thank you very much. You can respond to it or not. It's up to you.
Well, it does bring up one point. You bring up one point that I want to talk about. Some years ago, in one of the industry publications called Space News, they ran an editorial saying that in an editorial in Space News, they said, we've got to come up with a dedicated funding source to pay for all of this space stuff. Because for a long time, forever, the military-industrial complex has been saying that Star Wars will be the largest industrial project in the history of the planet Earth. Imagine that, right? So anyway, in this editorial, they said, we've come up with a dedicated funding source. And we're now sending our lobbyists to Washington to secure it. And they said it's the entitlement programs that officially are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and what is left of the tattered social safety net, right? That's it. These are the programs they've identified for cutting. In fact, Joe Biden, when he was in the Senate, was a long time going after Social Security, wanting to cut Social Security, along with a lot of other people. So there's no doubt in my mind that the way we defeat this thing is money. We fight for social progress. We fight for environmental cleanup. We fight for dealing with climate change. Here in Maine and Bath, in addition to our opposition to the christening of Aegis Destroyers, we do civil disobedience every time they're christened, and they're pumping them out now, 1 or 2 a year. And they're escalating the numbers of those because they want to send them to China and Russia. We also are calling for the conversion of the shipyard to deal with climate change. You know, we shouldn't be wasting our money on this nonsense, this pissing money down a rat hole. We should be converting the military-industrial complex, building commuter rail, offshore wind turbines, solar power, all tidal power systems. And so our campaign here is trying to integrate all these issues, not only saying no, but saying yes, let's move in this other direction.
Okay, next up is 9408. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, this is Kit. I think this has been a great discussion here by Bruce. Anyway, I would like Bruce to actually say, I guess, give the information on what the website is for Global Network and how to get a subscription, because we don't have a computer to get all that information. So anyway, that's just one thing I'd like him to do. The other thing is I do agree with what he said about where the money is going. There definitely needs to be more transparency regarding the billions of dollars in unaccountable budgets called the black budgets, which are very disturbing when you do look into this issue at how the U.S. military spends its money without any accountability. I think Raj was right about pointing out the direction of bankruptcy that could occur because of where the U.S. wants to put its money. On a side note, I just want to mention that Elon Musk tried to get his taxes lowered by claiming that Tesla was not an auto factory and that Alameda County Assessor's Office wouldn't buy it. But now Elon Musk is thinking of leaving California because he doesn't want to pay his taxes and he wants to set it elsewhere, get more support doing what he's doing. But this, I feel that people like him are just mad geniuses that are just bent on, well, they don't care what happens here on the Earth as far as the environment goes. There's a romanticization of mad geniuses who are escalating technology that can run amok when combined with capitalist profits. And, you know, this whole glorification of technology and entrepreneurship is just very disturbing to me. Not so disturbing to a lot of young people who find this so exciting. Another justification for the escalations of the arms, which I understand is, well, to get rid of the giggle factor. The U.S. military spent $22.5 million, which is a drop in the bucket, but the government takes the issue of UFOs or the fear of UFOs quite seriously, and which is their justification for also escalating this technology. There have been articles in the New York Times and a book written by Leslie Kane, who used to report for Pacifica, about the connection that the military has with this issue. And China and Russia take this issue even more seriously, along with key Democrats and Republicans, such as the astronaut John Glenn, and former presidents, the UN. UFOs have actually been documented to shut down nuclear weapon bases. And, you know, this could be one of our friends out there. Anyway, I just want to make those comments. Okay, thank you. And please say where we can get the find your website and the newsletter. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. The website is www.space4peace, and the 4 can be the word or the number, either way, space4peace.org, space4peace.org. I'll give you our P.O. box here. It's Global Network, Post Office Box 652, Brunswick, B-R-U-N-S-W-I-C-K, Brunswick, Maine. Maine is M-E, and the zip code is 04011, 04011. If you, again, I put the email, I put the website in there earlier in the chat. If you send me an email or a letter or whatever, I'll send you our latest newsletter. It's at the printer right now. So, and it covers a lot of these things I've been talking about today.
We can get that.
Okay, I have a quick comment and question, Bruce. First of all, just a note going back to what folks have been talking about. The question of guns versus butter has really changed in the modern era with the financialization of international capitalism. And the United States has just been running budget deficits for since the early 1980s when it started taking off. And really right now, the foundation of this, all of this incredible militarization that Bruce described, astonishing in his presentation, is the ability to spend money financed by other countries by buying US Treasury bonds. So I think that's something for us to keep our eyes on, how things have changed. The international financial system is the foundation on which militarization rests. And there's a reason why countries like Greece, for example, can't do anything with their superstructure, military, or whatever, compared to the United States. My question, Bruce, is that what you described in terms of what the United States is trying to do technologically is rather, it's astonishing and it's quite disturbing. And you also touched on the fact that some of this stuff are pipe dreams and just fake technologies and boondoggle money spending. So my question to you is, to what extent are a lot of these offensive, very, very high-tech, cutting-edge offensive weapons really going to be effective? And to what extent are they just boondoggles? Maybe you could comment on that.
I think it's both. There are both, as you say, very accurately. But just think about it. Humankind started with a rock, and then they went to a stick, and then a bow and arrow, and then a sword, and then a gun, a flint loading gun, then to a machine gun. And then before you know it, the atom bomb. And now we can send rovers to Mars. So you give these guys enough money and you give them enough time, and they can do amazing things. I don't underestimate their capabilities and their intentions. So I never downplay. A lot of people over the years, I've been working on this space stuff since 1982. And a lot of people have said, oh, Gagnon, don't worry about it. They're not going to be able to pull this shit off. Well, they have. And it's getting worse by the day. They fail a lot of times on a lot of new technologies, but they also succeed. When you can fly orbit for a whole year, this X-37 super drone up there that has total military capabilities, that's a pretty amazing accomplishment and very dangerous and very provocative. So I never underestimate them. I want to say that Russia and China are dumping their bonds, particularly China. They've been buying up a lot of US bonds over the years, but they're dumping them, and they're also dumping their dollars now. And so this is really freaking the United States out a lot. And one of the reasons why the United States is increasing its aggressiveness toward both those countries, again, because it sees the writing on the wall.
Yeah, we had a great presentation on this last month or the month before. I think it was Stan Smith spoke on the dollar. People could check it out on our YouTube channel, ICSS Marks. Very informative presentation, Stansfield Smith. Next speaker is Richard W. And then following that, I think what we're going to do is wrap up. Maybe Bruce, if you want to take a minute or two to closing remarks after Richard's question. Richard, if you would please unmute yourself.
Yep. Okay. Bruce, just to sort of get back to how we started this, we quoted from Marx about on his thesis on Feuerbach was that up till now, philosophers have interpreted the word. The point is to change it. And so I'm kind of wondering, because you having lived in my old state of Maine, I have some familiarity with the populace there. How are you reaching out to the people of Maine, and beyond that, of course, to bring up to affect change in this area? In other words, what suggestions do you have that we can take to the ground, if you will? Thanks.
Well, that's always the fundamental question. What do we do about all this stuff? I remember what Noam Chomsky said. He said, if you don't know about something, you certainly can't do anything about it, right? So the first job of, I believe, our first job in the global network is to make sure people are aware of this. And so over the years, of course, we've been working internationally. Every year we have an international meeting in a different country. Due to COVID right now, we can't do that. So we've been using Zoom like everybody else. But over the past years, since 1992, we've been going all over the world. And every time we bring a team of leadership from different countries to another country and they organize people to come and hear us, we're increasing the numbers of folks that understand this issue and have concern about it. So we're always about helping people learn more about it. Every year we have a Keep Space for Peace Week in October, where we ask people around the world to have a week of active events of any kind that they choose to bring this issue to people. And then, so that's, we've been doing that for many, 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 many years. And that helps, again, reach people. Here in Maine, I've been organizing peace walks. I've done 5 of them over the years. I did 5 in Florida before I moved from Florida to Maine in 2003. And we walk up and down the state, reaching people and talking to them, staying in churches, having potlucks in churches, all these kind of things, handing out flyers to people as we go, carrying signs and banners as we walk, usually for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And so those walks have really taken us to a lot of places and to a lot of people around the state. Then we also, there's a wonderful Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran named Will Griffin, who's on our board, and he's a really good filmmaker. So he's been making, we pay him to make us a video every month that we put on our website, and we send around to our mailing lists about one aspect, a different aspect every month about this space issue. And so that's reaching a lot of people. So we're trying everything we can to reach younger people, older people, anyone we can reach in every single way. Our newsletter, again, is a great source. A lot of people order extra copies that they hand out in their communities. So we're doing everything we know to do.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Bruce for his presentation. It was among the best that we've had, really one of the most important. I hope everybody really passes along the link that will be posted on our website in the next couple of days after we do some edits of the disruption out of the video. I'm going to try to get several people that I know to watch it. So I want to thank you, Bruce, and we want to extend an invitation for you to come back and speak when you have something that you'd like to present. It was a tremendous value and good discussion. Also, I wanted to thank all of the participants today. I wanted to apologize for the disruption. We're going to harden our security and try to figure out a way to avoid this sort of thing from happening again. I want to urge people to support the ICSS and to support the Marxist Library. I feel that our work is really starting to take off. We're having great presentations. We're getting good participation. Pass the word about our programs. Next week's program in particular, I want to urge everybody to show up, pass it along. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. And what we're going to do now is open up the board. This will be the end of the official part of the program. And you're welcome to stick around and just have an informal discussion, an unmoderated discussion. So again, thank you, Bruce. Really, really enjoyed and value your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. I really enjoyed it. You seem like a great group, and I'm grateful for the invitation. And as Alan said, I think sharing the information, sharing this video, but also the one I talked about earlier, Pax Americana and the Weaponization of Space. It's a great documentary film, and I would think if you could share that widely, it would really help increase the number of people understanding what this issue is all about. With that, I'll say goodbye and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Was great. Thank you. Just to let people know that the disruption has already been reported to Zoom. I will work with Zoom to get to the bottom of it if I can, if Zoom reacts. But anyway, just to inform you that we will be after the racists that try to hack in.
Interesting. They hijacked the screen share part. I don't think that they had broken into my account because I was able to get out and back in and no further disruptions.
Yeah.
But I did go out and back in and put on the screen share again. So it's a weakness in the screen share facility in Zoom. I think that did it. But I think what we're going to have to do is change our Zoom link, go back to changing it every week and sending it out. And we're going to harden. I think, Mehmet, we should do a little bit of research on how to do this. So
I agree. I
take these things very personally.
Me too.
As a computer person.
But
so
in the last, I don't know, few months, I've heard other attacks as well. But one thing we need to say is that what we are doing is bringing reaction, because what we are doing is telling the truth, exposing the lies, showing people what is going on out there, and that bothers the hell out of them. So that's why this is being attacked, and other programs as well that are trying to expose similar things. So I'm not surprised, but we are going to be, hardening the security and, maybe changing a little bit our format, so on and so forth.
I just want to make a quick comment about the presentation. I'm somebody who follows the question of militarization pretty closely. I did my PhD research was on conversion from the military to civilian economy. So I follow it and I read on it constantly for many years. And I have to say that even I was struck by how extensive and this militarization is, how dangerous it is, how bipartisan it is. I mean, he really, in going through all of the aspects of this in terms of offensive nuclear capability, spying, which is very much tied into it, and the fact that both the Republicans and the Democrats, it's very clear that they're all behind this. They're in the same step on this, and really a great deal of the talk about imperialism today, people just don't realize what an out of control monster we have that's just stomping its way around the globe, and just the potential for destruction that we have going on here. That this is not just some policy that is out of control by some personality of a given president, but it's really the face of imperialism that is hidden. And I'm so pleased that we were able to expose this to people today. So I was curious what people thought about that.
Good points. Good points. Anybody wants to? Okay, Richard, go ahead.
I guess we should unmute.
Oh, yeah. Richard, can you unmute yourself or? No, he can't? Oh, let's see.
Let's just open it up. Allow participants to, I checked allow everybody to unmute.
Oh, okay. So how about this, Richard? Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things I was reminded of during this thing is the United States has always sort of made China and Russia the enemy in the Korean quote conflict. When in fact both China and Russia stepped back from North Korea and basically made peace, and the United States has not. And we keep casting, the other as the enemy, and that's what we're doing again. I mean, we're casting the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese as enemies of, I'm not sure what, but as enemies. And it's a motif that's playing itself over again.
Remember
so
that.
I'd like to contribute the idea about use of this spacecraft
it's so meaningless. I mentioned to my daughter that one of the presenters on this program said something about it, which was a surprise that they did. I don't remember which presenter, that they were looking forward to being able to mine the moon. She says, do that and you really mess with Earth. There is that relationship with which we're all familiar. So people don't have a good understanding of what's going on is the problem. This was somebody who knew a lot about whatever presentation they made, and didn't have an idea that you cannot put the moon in a place where it's going to be pushed out of orbit at all. Anyway, this kind of thing, the space program, appeals to children. I mean, we all had, oh, I want to go to space. Oh, I want to touch the stars and all that kind of stuff. And this just flies right into there. I mean, you've got Musk, who obviously is a very warped mentation, and an example of how people are being seduced into relationships with everything around them. And this is one of them, and it's enticing children. Well, you see the people who have volunteered to do space, and especially being attractive to women. That's a real, to people who can't get a job and so forth. So that.
Jean would like to jump in for a moment here, because I was also reminded of another program we had some time ago. Our anarchist friend Lou Finzel gave a talk. I think the title was "No General but General Ludd," referring to the Luddites. And we have this idea about the Luddites being these crazy anti-technology people. But as Lou explained to us, this was not the case. They had a definite political program in which they targeted not every capitalist, but selected just the worst capitalists. And it was a very rational program by working class people, not simply against technology, but the misuse of technology. And I couldn't help but think of that when this talk was going on. And there are lots of things that, great technology, nuclear weapons, that's a new technology. Let's do that. Space planet travel, that's a great thing. And maybe there's just certain things that we should not do. Genetic modification of humans, for example, is one of those things. And there's just so much. And I think I'm not saying I'm just saying there are very severe questions, very deep questions, which need to be answered. And again, this talk helped bring out some of the Luddite in me, but I hope it did other people as well.
Go ahead. It's open mic. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the question I think should be not that again the technology, but who's using the technology for what purpose. So that's I think the main criticism of the Luddites is that I think just about all technology could be put. That technology, first of all, I think is in general a good thing. It is through technology that socialism is possible. You have to have a big enough pie to distribute it evenly in a meaningful way. And it frees man from the drudgery things. I am very pro-technology, pro-science, but it's just who uses it for what purpose. And there is a dangerous mentality of, I think it is real, that of generalizing that technology in general is a bad thing.
I want to append to that if I can. We think of needing to free labor from doing labor. And the other kind of idea is we want a lot of people doing whatever work needs to be done. We want labor intensive in the sense of people being able to replace the machines, or I'm not describing it well, but because this is such a foreign idea, people being able to do work for a couple hours a week. and it feels good to make things, and we're alienated from it. So the mechanization, we don't want the mechanization of everything, or the removal by mechanization of an opportunity for us to have hands-on experiences. Farming, for example, people like to put their hands in the dirt, but we don't want to do it back bent for 8 hours, 16 hours a day. So as you were saying, it needs to be considered, but it needs not to be bad. It's like against child labor. No, we want children to be productive members of society when they're 2, when they're 7.
Can I raise it?
Yeah, these are points that need to be considered while we're throwing these ideas out.
I disagree because I mean, you could always do it. You could always do your garden. That's not. But the idea is that you're removed from having to do it. There's nothing in an ideal society under communism. There's nothing that prevents you from doing these things. But technology frees us from having to do it. That's very important.
And you don't disagree. You don't disagree.
Can I actually have something I wanted to say before too many people leave. I want to make a quick shout out and thank you to Richard W., who, as a participant in the sessions, told us about Bruce and helped organize the session. And I think it's something that we really want to encourage people to, if you have ideas for speakers and you have contacts, to please let us know by sending us an email and contacting us. That's all. I just wanted to say that before too many people left.
Get Lou Finzel to come back and do some more stuff. He was wonderful.
Thank you, Richard.
Here, but I would also want to stress that, we are all volunteers, and it's not quite enough just to propose something that requires actual work to contact the people, set it up.
Richard actually did most of the work.
Richard did very good. I commend Richard for that. He has another one proposed, and we'll try to keep up with all this. But it's a lot of work simply organizing these. But
I found out how much work it does take.
Alan said.
Yeah, but I think one of the worst things about the late 60s was the anti-scientific attitude. As I said, in the Marxist Center for Marxist Studies, there was a wonderful lecture that this was this anti-working class infiltration of the left was purposely done, actually. There was because my father was a physicist. I'm a physicist too, and I remember people saying that science is somehow intrinsically evil, and that was a very popular, common. But like there was this mathematician. He was a Grothendieck. He was one of the top mathematicians. He was sort of an anarchist. I think he was a displaced person in World War II, and he was he remained stateless. Vietnam invited him to give the most advanced abstract mathematics lectures while underground, while the most intense bombing was going on. In spite of, that's what I call the hallmark of a true communist.
Can I comment on this? Yeah, I agree with Yusuf. I think the concept about science is the science is not free. Science has become a handmaiden of capital. And so the critique of science is a whole subject in which the concept of science for the people and science of the people and science by the people. These are important concepts. And you will notice that no communist country took a step ahead of for arms race. They had to match it. And I agree with you, Yusuf. Science is to free us. First of all, we want to know what the world is made out of. There are a lot of unknowns, and human mind is curious. But the science used for destruction has always come from warmongers, of which capitalism is unable to be anything but a warmonger. So I think this will stop only ultimately when the whole system is overthrown. And I think this is a long struggle. I don't think we can expect miracles to happen in the meantime. The peace movement is important. I'm not against peace movement, to restrain and to redirect those things towards it. You know, there was a sword to plowshare was a movement when Soviet Union ended, and that actually went the other way around. As you know, the capitalist, which I think Bruce very nicely showed how the capitalism lies, cheats, deceit. The only thing that makes any sense is profit and profit rate specifically. So it's a mad system. It has to be overthrown. The question is how. Enough said.
Can I jump in here real quick? And that is to, you know, it used to be that the military used to do its own research. It used to do its own production. And over time, we have privatized that. Maybe it's time we suggested that we get back to the military handling all its own, you know, like Texas A&M. It produces everything that it uses on its campus, on its grounds. Maybe it's time we need to get back to the military doing its own production, and getting away from private production.
When we talk about science, I think it's very important that we apply science to society. And that means scientific socialism. And we'll recall that one of the basic principles of Marx that he put forth was that you know, the revolution is not going to create an ideal society in and of itself. It has to go through a phase of the dictatorship of the proletariat. The working class has to take control of society and establish a dictatorship. And he said this quite clearly in numerous places. You know, between capitalist society and social and communist society lies the revolutionary transition, during which time the state must be the dictatorship of the proletariat. So I think we need to understand this scientific things, and certain things we throw out as great ideas. Yeah, they may be great ideas, but we need a working class dictatorship of the proletariat to implement those. And we would like to think that we could vote one in, but that may be a pipe dream. We'll see. But we'll talk about this more in the future, as we have in the past. Thank you.
I would like to ask a question that has been on my mind all week. And speaking of science, does anybody understand why these variants of the COVID virus are coming from elsewhere? There's the South African and the British and Brazilian, there has to be some mutations that are arising in the United States. It just goes to, it stands to reason, right? And yet we don't ever hear about that.
Oh, we had one last week from Los Angeles. We have our own mutant virus now. Hooray!
Oh, okay. Well, at least that's interesting. I hadn't heard about that. Thank you.
But, you know,
I read something about that they were being transmitted through our animals that we come in contact with, something about the animal carrying something that it begins to mutate. I don't know. That's the end of what I can remember.
Well, part of that is you, in order to determine mutant variations, you have to do the testing.
Yeah, you have to do the DNA test.
Exactly, and we've fallen pretty short in testing, amongst other things. So we wouldn't really know unless we stumbled upon it, you know, what variations in the virus are out there. Now, so they anyways, I'll leave it at that point.
I mean, I think this is really profound. So, you know, the Chinese, everything, any money any resources that the Chinese put to combating what the United States is doing in space, or by answering it with their own technology, means that they don't have those resources to invest in biological research about diseases. And, you know, it's often, there's an expression, you know, I hear a lot, you know, they could send a person to the moon, but they can't find a cure for cancer. It's not that they can't, they being the capital, they don't want to.
Well, I mean, I think there are some, I think, quite mundane explanations why you can't. It's not so easy to find a cure for cancer because that's because cells mutate. I mean, that's.
I understand. I understand. It's just an expression, but I'm just making the point of the relative investment that is done. It's all controlled by the interests of capital.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to thank Yusuf, particularly in terms of, well, two things. One is to his comment on we as a group, ICSS, should be working more closely with the
Center for Marxist Education.
Yeah, I did send him a small little contribution and talked to our comrade Wadi, emailed him. And I think we need to it would be good to figure out some ways we could work more closely. There's also somebody, Gary told me about in Washington, D.C. that we should contact. The other thing I wanted to say is let's not put down the 60s too much. There were some positive things there. I'm thinking about the hippies, yippies, and peace and anti-pricers that had this thing where they surrounded the Pentagon and they were going to levitate it.
The good old days.
And the thing is, interesting, they applied for a permit and they received the permit. The park department said, okay, have your demonstration, but you can't levitate it more than 8 feet. So I think we need to maintain a kind of nice attitude about the things they were trying to do back then. That was a good period of revolutionary development. That's
no, but it had some. It had its drawbacks in retrospect, and I think we should take a hard look at that. It went in the wrong direction.
We have to look at it from all perspectives.
They gave us some good slogans like, if the government won't stop the war, the people will stop the government.
And make love, not war. So. Well, this has been a
okay. About Center for I gave you the email of the group, so send it to the group. Apparently, it doesn't have much time for it because he's looking after his wife, and Yeah, I told them about it last evening.
Yeah, and I watched that program. The fellow, I forget his name. He's an interesting dude, but he also needs to be taken with a grain of salt, I think. But I know that the center is, we're very fortunate. We have the Marxist Library, and we do have a home. And I think they rent the space there. So they have a regular monthly rental, which is far in excess of ours. And I really think they do need support because they're our sister organization and we need to support them, I think.
And one more technical comment. Please realize that Zoom has moved the hand-raising feature to reactions and it's no longer in participants.
It depends on which version you have, but that's certainly true.
That's the latest version. If you have updated your Zoom,
mine just moved over by itself. I didn't do anything, and it.
Well, it updated.
Yeah, updated. But also, you have to be on full screen to see that reactions button.
Yeah.
I'm on the gallery scene here.
First of all, I wanted to thank Mehmet for his quick thinking and quick action.
Absolutely.
Counter disruption. Very good, Mehmet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And also I want to say that as a person who's in charge of security, we assume it won't be happening again, and that if it does, you're at risk of losing your position.
All right.
Your paid position, right?
Yeah, my paid position. Yeah. How about my retirement and pension? What happens to those?
There could even be more serious consequences, Mehmet, for security breach like that again.
Okay, guys. So it's 1 o'clock now. So we'd like to end the session. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Yeah. And really, thanks for jumping in, Alan, and doing the great presentation. Eugene, Raj, for your introductions, and all the participants. Thank you very much for everything.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Niebel Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses. Since we can no longer pass the hat at our in-person forums, please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, @yahoo.com, and the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Niebel Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.